Michael Grupp is a lawyer and an entrepreneur. He started his career in arbitration law at an international commercial law firm. So understanding the business on the legal side as well. And he then founded startups, TCUs and Lexalgo, which later was acquired by Bryter, if I understand that correctly. He regularly publishes and speaks on legal technology and data protection. He's an adjunct professor for legal tech and IT business at the G.W. Goethe University in Frankfurt, a member of the executive faculty of Bucerius Center on the legal profession, and I think most importantly is the CEO of Bryter. And Michael, my understanding would be you introduce then what Bryter is, because you're much more competent than I am. But Bryter has been extremely successful also in its growth, and in particular in its fundraising. He raised already 90 million from investors such as Excel Partners and Tiger Global. And his customers at Bryter include corporate law firms and corporate legal departments, banks, insurance companies, and public institutions. Probably one word why we decided also to have a presentation like on a commercial product like this at our conference. I think it's extremely important for many of our participants who are in the legal profession on the one side or in administration to understand that there is a sort of roller coaster in digitalization in law. Probably you don't see it coming at the moment, but it's rolling already. And Bryter is one of those companies at the forefront offering their products. And I think it's very important if you are interested to get digitalization, if you're listening in on those topics we had the days before, like computational law or data graphs like we did yesterday, you shouldn't overlook that there is sort of the basic digitalization that comes first on processes, on routines, and there this sort of tools like Michael is now presenting, I think are driving, and I think that was also the point Homan made, and where this links very well together. So Michael, I would pass over to you and ask you to start your presentation.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for inviting Bryter as a vendor. So I take this spot. Before I go full in product and basically start to look at the world essentially through Bryter's eyes, I want to highlight two things. First, Bryter has a root in legal informatics, or the artificial intelligence and law, if you want. So before building the company, there was a predecessing company, more of an agency, you could say, as you rightfully pointed out, which was called Lexalgo, and which I founded in 2012, and which was inspired a lot by the legal informatics community that I got to learn, got to know in 2010, 2011. So I was very interested in what was going on, and I basically toured the world a little bit in the legal informatics world. Now, I'm not an academic by nature, and being a lawyer, I still like the practical implications and many of the contributions in this world. And some of these contributors are still active today and are even here. I was always asking myself, what could we do in the legal market with this? And at some point, I just had to do it. So I built Lexalgo to basically build in our world, we would call it an expert system shell, right? It's a shell. It allows you to build decision support systems. Then we can go down the slippery slope where how much this is then a business rule management system, how much is the decisioning support engine, where the expert system shell actually starts and stops. But technically, it's a shell, and we said we can bring this to the masses a little bit. And I had an actual job in the last years before Bryter. I had another startup company that I co-founded that we ran for 4 years. We sold this. And then in 2018, saw that the world was ready for basically a more user-friendly automation platform, and we decided to build Bryter. So that's just a comment on that we have been active in the community, and we followed it always. And Bryter is very much inspired by this. We have good ties to Professor Herberger and Saarbrücken as well. And it was always the gap. If you want to do something user-friendly and very intuitive, it will be easy to use and almost simplistic, maybe too simplistic. On the other hand, if you build something that is used in the enterprise for high-value use cases, it will become powerful, maybe too powerful. So this is the conundrum. This is the challenge, the Gordian knot we have to solve. Build something that is user-friendly enough for people to understand it, just like they would their iPhone. Not read a manual, not watch hours of videos, not go into training extensive, but actually learn it on the fly, just like you use your office desktop solutions. That was one big challenge. And the other thing was, there's only a market if you bring in corporate legal and corporate compliance and the big law firms. If you can't align those, there's no market. These were the key principles for building Bryter. And yes, so we were incredibly fortunate. So we like working a lot. So we have a very busy team. But there's one thing you can never influence as a founder, and that is timing, right? So we were very happy that we built Bryter in a time where basically the first wave of automation had been seen in the world. And we could then say, now we are bringing something for legal and compliance. And let's say the enterprise landscape was ready for it. Also, investors had learned what that meant. And this is different, right? So there were other companies in other countries having rule-based systems in the decades before. But sometimes it's just a matter of timing and having the right time window, and we were lucky to hit that wave. So Bryter has been fairly successful in the last 3 years. So we're only 3 years old, but we count roughly 200 people today. So we grew extremely fast. We have offices around the world, the most let's say important thing is we have customers that are running Bryter on a global scale. The interesting thing here is that half of our customers are corporate departments, so they are people that have the challenge of making their knowledge digital in an organization and accessible. But on the other side, that are not technicians, right? That are domain experts. They are lawyers, they're compliance managers, they're people that are regulatory professionals and not coders. And on the other hand, we also have law firms and professional service firms that are using Bryter across the world. Here is a summary of some of the law firms that work with Bryter, and we're very happy that this is the case. I want to highlight one of the things, maybe also as an inspiration for the discussion to come. So I think if you look at it just by the numbers, Bryter is probably one of the biggest expert systems in use, if you want to call it that, right? So one anecdote I want to say is that we have been supporting the German Consumer Protection Agency in their endeavors to bring consumer A to J, access to justice for claims that were relevant for consumers. So we have supported, or they have used our software in some of the cases around the so-called diesel scandal, but there have been cases in an insolvency proceeding in Bavaria where it's about an energy company, and they are also using Bryter in making access to knowledge accessible all over the world. So there are a couple of class actions running on Bryter, and at the same time, also Bryter is being used by people organizing defenses in these claims and organizing these claims. So it's really become a tool that people use for high frequency transactions and high frequency processing of documents. But it's also being used to just build applications for self-service. We have around 5,000 modules live by now around the globe by different customers, and are very happy because so far the customers that have actually started working on Bryter have stayed with us so far, right? So they are still very happy, and that is a good way. So of course I'm doing a project and a product demo today, so I don't want to bore you with the PowerPoint slides, but just to basically place the philosophy of Bryter quickly in the right dimensions. I want to say that, as I mentioned, the key challenges: how do you make domain expertise scalable? So how can you help I want to say a lawyer, but can also be a compliance manager, to make their knowledge digital, although they cannot code, so they lack development skills. On the other hand, the developers are lacking the domain expertise and the insights. So in all the IT projects in a company today, there's a collaboration happening, right? Those two people collaborate. And that works well sometimes. In most cases, it doesn't go so well. So we have horrible numbers that are regularly published, how many IT projects are failing. But even if they actually start, I want to start maybe there, they require money and they require time. So typically you have to ask for budget and you have to ask for availability and resources in general to basically kick off a project, which means many repetitive requests stay very manual for legal and compliance. So if you have a question at a company like McDonald's, you had to send an email to the legal department and they would answer. Maybe the next day if they're quick, maybe it takes a bit longer if there are many requests. And this is manual work of the people involved, of the high value experts. So here the question is, how can we help them to go digital? If they don't get always budget and if it takes a long time to kick that project off, and then if the project is kicked off, maybe it fails. So we wanted to solve this. This is the key thing. So Bryter comes in as this platform in the middle. So we say, instead of explaining how law and compliance work for the IT professionals, we are giving a skill set to people that are the domain experts and we let them build. It's very simple. So far, there are not many tech providers focusing on legal compliance and other regulatory units predominantly and really focusing on their work. And this is what Bryter does. So if we explain what Bryter does to people that are technically savvy, so coders and developers, we kind of say Bryter is just the digital version of a programmer. It's a full stack developer team because you can go from ideation to prototyping to publishing something and get it live. You can then test it. You can iterate on it and incrementally work on it. You plug it into other systems, and then at the end, you deploy it live and you run it in an enterprise-ready fashion. And all of this is on Bryter, so you don't have to change systems. You don't have to bring more resources. So this is why our customers use it. They bring in Bryter as almost a digital support. So of course, they also think, how can we be really fast? And instead of having a team that then has to collaborate on every app, they bring in Bryter because it basically solves them their problem end to end. Before I jump into the demo, I just want to quickly highlight one aspect that is always very interesting in the discussion that I'm sure will take place after this too. And this is the question of use cases and value of the use cases, right? It's something that Human also has already mentioned, and this is something that is an interesting aspect. I don't think that no-code and low-code systems will be sustainably successful if they are not managing to also be used in high-value use cases. I mean, in other words, if you don't take this seriously, if people use it for playing around, for training, this is not going to be there for a while. It needs to grow up. It needs to be long-term sustainably successful. And the challenge with no-code is that, it's easy to use. It's enabling people to do something that they weren't able to do before, but this is why it looks simple. And if something looks simple, people think it's simple. So this is something I want to show because there's something happening in the world currently in the IT digitization. So, companies go digital, companies want to go digital. So all of their use cases are being assessed in, can we make this faster? Can we make this digital? And there are two basically axes. You have the process value, and then you have the process complexity. And of course, in that quadrant, right, all the use cases that are relatively valuable and relatively complex, you see that there's a strong correlation, right, in this curve. And they are being dealt by enterprise IT, and this will not change. Enterprise IT in the future will deal with very high value and very complex problems. This is something that is there, and it will not go away. Then you have the problems that are really not complex at all. And there's a strong correlation that these problems often are not very valuable. And this is the other part of the spectrum. This is where you have an idea for maybe automating one type of a document, or you bring in a word macro, or you build in, you help people in one decision chart. So these are the things, I want to call them work hacks, or things you do individually. Here, often this is not a 50,000 euro problem. This is not something where you bring in tech. The interesting thing is in between, right? This big bulk. So we call it the SME of use cases, right? So this is everything between a 20, 30,000 euro problem up to a 500,000 problem, or up, depending on at what point you have to go over to enterprise IT and how you bring them in. But here, these are the interesting cases. So to be very, very precise, these are the cases where law waits for budget approval, but it's a 200,000 euro project, and there are other couple of million projects, maybe in procurement and maybe in the financial service departments, that are more priority in the company. So law waits for approval for their project. And to give you some examples of what these use cases are, so this is mostly in the area of service deliveries, right? So everything where a legal department repetitively gives answers, gift and hospitality checks, intake mechanisms, but you have many other examples: freelance checks, repetitive tax questions, invoice assessments, many things where you have repetitive reasoning, but still at scale, so that it amounts to some problem. That is where this becomes high value, and there are more and more use cases coming. So of course, I'm going to showcase you now in a second a couple of them, but the regulatory world we're living in brings in use cases every day. So one of the hottest topics, and this is one I'm going to show you in a second, is ESG compliance, environmental and social governance problems. So you want to do assessment, what your carbon footprint is, big topic. We have the problem, for instance, of LIBOR repapering. This is a big topic that comes as a very high value problem. You have hundreds of thousands of contracts that all contain a LIBOR clause. You know, it's an interbank exchange rate. So if you lend money from one bank to another, you have a reference index, and this is changing. LIBOR is shelved, so we need to repaper these contracts and also write an addendum about them and assess them first. Something that you can do really well with an automation platform like this, and where, of course, your value is in the high 7 and 8 digits if you automate this. But this is the spectrum of use cases, and of course, you have also very relatively simple tools where it's just about document generation of one specific application. So I wanted to showcase you this and basically then lead over to the next slide. Why? And show you, make a demo. If you remember nothing about Bryter and you really forget most about my presentation, then just maybe remember this one slide. If you want to build something digitally in the company, you have an ROI bar, meaning that you have to prove budget and you have to prove value of the use case to get budget. And this is hard to get, and no code makes this lower. So we basically make use cases available. Somebody sometimes funnily said we are fracking use cases. They're getting available now because people wanted to build a document automation, but it couldn't build it. And now you can. And this is something that will change and impact the businesses a lot. Law firms now can build applications that they weren't able to. And that is a big potential for the digitalization of the enterprise in general. So this as a quick intro into why we are doing this at Bryter, of course, and basically give you a bit of an understanding where Bryter sits. And now I'm jumping into the actual solutions. I'm happy to showcase you what Bryter looks like and how it works. So I must for this change my screen sharing quickly. You understand me, right? And everything is good. Yeah. Okay. Good. So here we are. I'm showing you here is the Bryter cockpit of applications, and here we can showcase what you can build with Bryter. Right? It's a selection, basically like a little app store where you can see what people can build. Use this to showcase what Bryter does. And here you find, depending on the team you're working with, so antitrust, competition, government, investment, depending on the team or depending on the type of application, you find solutions that showcase what Bryter does. So a quick one, because this is interactive. Somebody asks if Bryter makes the platform available to universities for training. So I like this question. I will open this. Look, there's a Bryter program, which we call Bryter Open, which is available for academic bodies and NGOs. We are collaborating here with many universities around the world that use it, that help bring this in courses. So feel free to just reach out and basically apply for it. And then we have a team that will support you in leveraging Bryter in a social and academic educational context. And there can also be more projects coming out of this. I just want to add this to answer this question here. But going back into demo cockpit, so this is just a selection of applications you can build with Bryter. So of course you want to see the action itself. So I would propose that we jump into something that is maybe a use case that many of you can understand and have seen before. Maybe a data breach is something that is everybody understands it and what it does. So we click into this. So here we have a data breach assistant. So what you see here is built on Bryter, right? Everything is Bryter, and it has been built by people in our team that are, of course, getting more and more savvy in how to leverage the platform, but they're not coders, so they can build on Bryter. So what you see here is a Bryter module. You see it in the front end. So why do we need a data breach? Well, the typical situation here is we are in a company, the company is big, you have a data and privacy compliance team. The compliance team says we need to have a way for you to immediately report a data breach. And reporting a data breach often also means checking, was there one? So maybe you're in doubt, right? And then if you want to report it, you also, as a compliance team, you want to sort it, you want to process it, you want to maybe trigger some deadlines. You want to immediately do a legal assessment on top of the data you get. So it's a nice example of two overlapping use cases, right? You have in the front end, people in sales, maybe people in marketing that maybe did something wrong. They maybe sent the wrong email to the wrong people, and now they're afraid there was a data breach. And in the back, you have the compliance people that want to do the assessment, they want to be informed, they want to see it immediately, they want to act. So this is the situation we're in. So here, this is the part where you would then enter. So you see here, you have a front end. There are some additional information, and this front end looks as you would expect a front end to look like, right? There's some conditional things here. And now I would put in my name. As you can imagine, this is also interesting. Michael, I might add my email address, and we continue here. And now we can say, what is a personal data, right? So what is a personal data breach? Then I have a question like, has this occurred, or is it likely to be the case? So maybe say yes. Now here we can of course go deeper and help people to answer this question correctly, but we just said yes. So please select the applicable type of data. So maybe we had some personal data and maybe also some customer data that we sent out. Does the data breach also have some special data? Maybe here we say no. And then we can add maybe some additional information here. I don't want to say no additional info. I will add a ReMeP just like this, so you know why I'll do this. We'll say, and now we have to add in the time and the date of the knowledge when I heard of this for the first time. So of course I need to give a date. So I say this was yesterday, or the day before yesterday, and maybe we say it was 9:15 and AM or PM. I added it. It is by default there. So the report is submitted. This is all great. This is done. So of course, as you can imagine, this can be opened on a phone, in a smartphone app. I will show you different ways how you can publish these front ends. So most of the time, it's even invisible. So if you worked, for example, with a German consumer protection agency, you may have used the Bryter module, you don't even know it. And there are many applications running, and it's not always styled like this. It looks different. But now I did the report. So what is happening now? So now the compliance team wants to have a look at it, right? So they go into this and can have a dashboard where they see how many reports are coming in per week. And now they can jump into the cases. And you can see here that the report I just generated is here in the top here. So we see that Michael, I added this case report here. And also I provided this information. I can assess the severity of the case. I can go over here and change it. And which is also interesting is based on the timestamp that I gave, this tool already collected the deadline, right? So, you know, there's I think 72-hour deadline running that you have to act on the reported incident after you know about it. So this is already here 3 days later added to the calendar. So we see here a tag that is introduced here, so we immediately action on it. And of course, there's an overview a little bit of how the process worked, right? So just the process diagram, what is now going on internally, who's investigating. So now you are the professionals, right? You're now the compliance team, and you're mildly impressed. So you say, okay, cool, Michael, but this is a data breach assessor. So there are maybe applications available where you can use this off the shelf, and you can program such a data breach assessor, right? So the magic of Bryter is that whatever I just showed you is something that has been built by the compliance team. So they have not used coding to do this. They have done this. They have done this on their own. So I can jump into what the data breach assessor actually looks like behind the scenes, right? So we can go into the back end of Bryter and have a look of what Bryter looks like. So I will showcase you this. I have to move this demo bar a little bit because it's in my way. Hope that is okay. It's a bit annoying. So now you see here, this is Bryter in the back end, right? So this is how Bryter looks like. So we can go into the data breach assessor and have a look. So I prepared a copy basically to demo this, and this is what Bryter now looks in the back end. So what you see here is something that is very similar to many applications in the no-code low-code space. So it's not very unusual. You have on the left, you have a pane which has this drawing surface, right? I want to do this away so we can also make this big. So you have on the left, you have this big pane and shows us the module. You see here, I can move this, right? You see here the assessment flow of my example that I gave you. So here we had a confidentiality score added, and we had a couple of other information pieces added that were visible. You didn't see this. This was running in the back end. And on the right here, you see the content, and you can manage the content. So on the left, it gives you a drawing pane where you draw, and on the right, you see how the content is being managed. So maybe you have seen and heard that we compare Bryter to a box of Legos. We sometimes, it's Bryter's Lego for lawyers, and we say this because everything you see in Bryter, everything that happens in the software is a Lego brick. It's a brick of software, right? It's a predefined piece of code, and you can add it here in the tool. So you can go in here and you say, I want to add an input, and this input should be maybe a multi-select or a text or an email address or a number of many other things. You could also say, actually, I want to delete it. I want to add something else. I maybe want to add an action. And you can say, I want to run a calculation. I want to create a document. I want to have some specific search replace actions, or I want to trigger some integration. So everything you can imagine and everything what you would need as a professional is in the Lego box. So you can just add a new box, and using the box, you just add it, and then you define what it should do. So here, for example, we say we want to do math. It's a bit boring because we don't have values yet, right? But you could then jump into available functions, and then you could run into there and like what functions do we have available? And just like in Excel, where you have different things, you see here that it will start to basically understand what you wanted with all the values that you put into the document. There's one thing I want to give you basically as a direct understanding of the magic, is the variable structure. Before I do this, I just show you around a little bit through the Bryter world. We may have a discussion later on about how powerful this gets. So already now I want to showcase you some of the things that make Bryter powerful, just to give you a glance, because of course this is a short demo. We can go deeper here. One of the things that every user needs who's not a coder is a tool that allows you to test whether this works. So there's an inspect mode. There's a tool that basically allows you to run through the tool of time and to basically dry test everything. So this is important because we are in scenaric reasoning, right? So these are often tree structures or decision table structures. So to assess all the outcomes that come out, you want to actually try run them and test them. So you have an assessment where you can basically put in information here, and you can then say what it does. And you can basically run through the application, test it while you have it. This is stage one. Then you maybe want to assess the logic that you're building. So you actually go into something like a debugger down here. It will give you suggestions. It will help you to find more areas where you actually need support and where you could say, look, there's an empty input field. Maybe we should look at this. Maybe we need to assess it. So it also gives us an understanding of the completeness of rules. Right? So here, for example, this is something you actually do and calculate a risk score. So you go into more detail and you evaluate that risk with more depth and you assess this, right? So you have this basically debugger on board, so you can work with this. And as soon as you build a rule that doesn't make sense, Bryter will complain and tell you, look, I think there's a loop that doesn't make sense. Please check it. So it helps you to build the content. Second thing that Bryter does, it helps you, of course, also to manage the content as soon as it gets complex. So now a data breach tester can be a very simple intake tool, almost like a survey where you say, put in data and it comes out. But often these tools get really big. And then we talk about big in the sense of 1,000 nodes. It's possible, I've seen it. Often then you get down to different modules and you pick them, but it's possible that you build very big ones. And then you want to keep an overview of what you actually built in here. So Bryter has a content management system, almost like a closed library, where you have all the content that you built in and you visualize it here. And this also means that you can find all the rules that actually define the structure of the software, and you can manage them directly in the rule overview and can work with it. So these are some things that help you to build more powerful applications. So last thing that I want to show you why Bryter is sometimes a bit powerful is one of the things that helps you to then also connect it to databases. What you can do is you add case databases to these modules. And just like I showed you in the data breach assessor front end, all the sessions and all the things that actually then later run on Bryter are basically collected in the database. So just imagine what this gives to the user. They have a database on board, build an intake tool. The intake tool collects all the data. And now you can build another tool that also runs on the database and actually performs more actions based on the data you just collected. So what people then do is that they actually define actions and trigger points based on specific legal assessments that are frequent. So for example, in the case of data breach assessment, now you would start running assessments in the back immediately and maybe send out emails or trigger databases and start processing that data breach that you saw. So this was a full ride through the platform, a high level to show you what it does. And I'm sure you have questions, so I will stop in a minute. I just want to show you one last thing, just to give you a quick feeling of how this works. So if we would build a new module, see, this is what it looks if you start Bryter from scratch. One of the things that people often ask is how they can actually work with this really fast. One of the very, very simple things is, I showed you the pre-built module with a data breach assessor. But if you start from the very first module, you want to build something simple, you really start with, the blank canvas like this. You can add something super, super simple. Hello, what is your name? So I add a question mark here. I call this node. Look what happens here, by the way. Maybe you just wait for here at the center here. So I stopped the comment thing. And I changed this here. I call it name, right? I rename it. Boom. So it changed immediately. And I can do this because now it always, fully connected end-to-end. Now I do a next node, and I can reference what I just put in here. So I can say hello, and now I click the add sign, and you see the variable that we just generated is referenceable here. So I could even go and say we do a rule in here, and we said only if the name is is Michael, for example. Yeah, in the name, or I have to turn it into only if the name is Michael. Then we go to the right, else we go to the left. And now I can build here really complex conditions in here with scoring models based on the constant I put in. I want to show you this just to give you a quick glance of how this works. 1 second. So I just want to show you, this is the name, and then it's the hello name, and it works. So we may add a smiley, and we say, we run it. So I would go into the preview mode, and we say, hello, what is your name? And my name is Michael, and I say enter, and it says, hello, Michael. And now imagine this is a referenceable piece of information that you can then use throughout the document. And just like this, with this Lego logic, you start building even powerful things. You start building document automation pieces. So of course, it lets you generate every document in a fairly sophisticated level of detail. And you can even attach this to database entries. And they are then based on this very, very simple connectivity logic, very powerful applications. So I have a couple of questions here. I will, if that's okay, just dive in. Somebody asked where I would place Bryter compared to its competition. So of course, this is relative to what you define as competition. We always say that the biggest competitor to Bryter is to either do nothing or to work with in-house IT and wait for budget. So, but this is maybe an unfair way. The key elements of Bryter is, and here I go back into my initial introduction, Bryter is two things, and these two things really well. It is easy to use. So even if it does powerful things, it's easy to use. On the other hand, it's enterprise ready, and it's able to run in a big company and a big organization and solve for complex problems. So at some point, IT will take over. This is why Bryter has open APIs, and you can do code injections at some point. You can open it up and collaborate with bigger enterprise systems. That's not a problem. But for the legal and compliance assessments that need to go digital, you can use Bryter. And so far, we did not hear many complaints of people that were lacking a feature. It is more that Bryter, as it gets more mature, has more and more functionality. And we can almost prove this because the new G2 analyst report was published today, where we were placed a leader in the quadrant, and we have actually are the most serviced and user-friendly solution for our customers. So it's something that is both user-friendly and powerful. Somebody asks, how long will it take me as a lawyer to understand how to use Bryter and to produce results that can be implemented? So this is something I often challenge people. I say, we put our money where our mouth is. So the bet is, if you ask for a demo and you set it up, typically after 45 minutes of an introduction, and we build a small use case together, so we have professionals that just do demos every day, you will be able to understand the basics of Bryter. So you'll be able to, just like in Microsoft Word, write something, save it, print it, edit it. This will work. And then you know enough to take it from there and to continue. So of course, Bryter has a big help section where you can, in the support center, learn how the procedures work, what use cases are there. You can actually get every feature that is there, and you find a video, for example, about documents, document generation. You find everything, how that exactly works. And the tool is self-explanatory with little videos. So we know that even students are able to run this with little introduction, and they're able to do this. So how long? Easy use cases, document automation. This is in a couple of hours, you're up to speed. My course at Frankfurt University is always up to speed after an hour of introduction, and then they go. And then after that, there are law firms. Paul Hastings is one of them that build very powerful solutions, and these, of course, take weeks to build, but only weeks, right? So it's not that you have IT projects that take quarters or years and maybe never get finished. So that's an important aspect. Somebody asked whether Bryter is including or interlinking with AI software. So I assume that you refer to text extraction and text analytics software with machine learning functions. Here, I can answer. We integrate into all the leading platforms. So we have an integration into Kira. Eigen, Seal. We work with every platform that needs text extraction. And in the LIBOR use case I made, where it's about the repapering, we collaborate, for example, with Kira, where you process many documents with text extraction software, and then Bryter takes it on and does the repapering part with the rules. So we collaborate, we integrate there. If you have a tool, we probably know it already. And the other way around, if you run Bryter, you can just plug these other tools in. Somebody asks, does Bryter allow export of code for reuse or redevelopment? The answer, what is the position about working with academic teaching? Okay, so this is the second question. First question, allow export of code. You can, if you are basically building your modules on Bryter, later export the modules if you want, because it's your knowledge, it's your IP, so you own it. But other than that, the code itself is on the platform, so it's being used on the platform. And the second question, we will help for the academia to make this possible. Input-output functions, everything you need. So typical enterprise use, anything that is typically required. Then you asked the chart that I showed on the back end looked like similar to flowcharts. Is flowcharting part of the process? Yes. So you draw the process, and then this process gets actionable. So now I have to apologize. I'm running out of time. I want to be mindful of this and respect it. So I'm very thankful for everybody who listened in, and I wish you a great conference. Thank you very much for having here. I want to introduce to my colleague Joanna Sidhu, who is also joining the conference, who is available for any question you also have for the panel discussion that comes up shortly. So yeah, without further ado, I would hand over back to the main stage. And thank you all for listening to us. And please feel free to reach out both on LinkedIn. I'm very accessible, or via the conference platform.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. Was extremely interesting, and you got it into very comprehensive in a short time slot. So if we may, we will then pass on additional questions we receive and get back the answers later. And for you, for the audience, there's now a short break. And we are back at 4:15 and looking forward to the roundtable discussion then. Thank you.